In the next few minutes, I want to talk about Hebrew nouns and also a little bit about Hebrew adjectives. Hebrew nouns have three basic characteristics. They can have gender, well, they do have gender. They can have number, they do, and state. State is the one aspect of Hebrew nouns that is going to be completely different from anything in English. But let's go ahead and start with some of these characteristics of Hebrew nouns. First of all, Hebrew nouns have gender. If you've ever studied a language like Spanish or French or German, you know that other languages often distinguish gender. So iglesia, the Spanish word for church, is feminine. Now, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it doesn't mean that Spanish-speaking people think of churches as being women. Gender is not exactly the same as sex. Gender is simply a way of thinking of a word. And so in Hebrew, there are some crazy things out there where people would say, well, because the word for wisdom, chokmah, because it's feminine, therefore some Jews thought of wisdom as a female consort. That's just crazy. In fact, that's completely ludicrous. Gender doesn't translate into sexuality in any way, shape, or form. So it's true that if you were to write a poem about wisdom, you might say wisdom, she is a wonderful person, you know, or Proverbs, when God created the world, I wisdom was there by his side. But it is completely ignorant to suggest thereby that the Jews literally, or Israelites literally, thought of wisdom as a female woman. I mean, that just betrays a complete lack of understanding of how language works. That's not what gender means. She's a grand old church, you know, or whatever. That doesn't mean, wow, they actually think that churches are women. No, not at all. Gender actually probably is not of much value whatsoever when it comes to interpreting passages. The only thing that gender does is it can tell you what words maybe go with which, because nouns and adjectives have to match in gender. But in terms of interpretation, you're not going to get a lot of meaning out of gender. But there is masculine and there is feminine, these two genders. Now, the simplest kind of, now these are two different words. Melech means king and Malkah means queen. This is not the same word. These are two different words. The masculine nouns tend to be the shorter ones. Hebrew, as you may know, is a language that likes to have three basic letters as the root, as the basic starting point for a form. And the masculine, when it comes to noun, masculine words will tend to just have three letters. This kametz he on the end here, kametz he, often will indicate a feminine noun. And so in this case, melech, king, is queen when it's malkah. By the way, melech is a kind of Hebrew noun called a segelit. Segelits, a lot of Hebrew words tend to accent the final syllable, but segelits are a particular kind of word that accent the second to last syllable, melech. And so that's just a little trivial pursuit. You don't have to know that. In this world of increasingly free tools and resources, you don't probably need to memorize that kametz he often indicates a feminine noun, because your cheats, logo software, Bible works, they're going to tell you that this is feminine and this is masculine. So probably don't want to waste a lot of brain cells on that. But gender is one of the characteristics of a Hebrew noun. Number is another characteristic of a Hebrew noun. There are singular and plural forms. Now this is a little more important for interpretation, because you want to know whether you're talking about one thing or you're talking about more than one thing. And so I brought the singular forms here from the previous slide. So there's melech, king, and there's malkah, queen. Those are both singular. Here are the most typical plural forms. Malkot is feminine plural, and then malachim, malakot is feminine plural, and then malachim is masculine plural. So if melech means king, then malachim means kings. And if malka means queen, then malakot means queens. Again, you don't have to know these endings because whatever cheats you use are going to tell you whether it's singular or plural. But those are fairly predictable patterns of Hebrew nouns. So if you happen to have enough brain cells to memorize them, it certainly won't hurt you. Hebrew, the plural can do more than one thing. It can simply mean a number, so it can mean one thing versus more than one thing. But it can also be honorific. May it please us to do this, or whatever. Or it could be abstract, something that's metaphorical. So plural doesn't always mean more than one thing. Let us make man in our own image. Probably no Jew thought. Let's just be frank. No Jew thought of the Trinity when they read that in Hebrew. Trinity wasn't a clear Christian doctrine even until 325 A.D. And so certainly no Jew in either the Old Testament or the New Testament thought of the Trinity when they read Genesis 1:27. Now you could say God planted it there. I'm not opposed to believing that. In fact, the Hebrew word for God, not the name of God, but the word for the category God, is Elohim, a plural. See the Hirik Yod Mem Im. Elohim is the word for God. It is plural, and yet it is always used with a singular verb. So that's an interesting thing. Was God planting a little hint there that he was a plurality of persons? Again, no Jew thought that, or New Testament author probably thought that because the idea of the Trinity wasn't honed until a few centuries into Christianity. But it is interesting, isn't it? Hebrew does also have a dual, which is quite interesting. So shemayim there, the word for heaven, heavens, is plural. Why? Maybe it had to do with the way the Hebrew people pictured the skies. Maybe they pictured the skies as being two in some way. Waters above, water below the firmament. I don't know why shemayim is dual. There are waters. The word for waters is dual. I don't know why. And probably if you were to stop an ancient Jew on the street, an ancient Hebrew or Israelite on the street, they probably wouldn't have been able to tell you either. And so we need to be careful about overreading these sorts of things. Words weren't used in the abstract. They were used in common everyday speech. And ancient peoples like the Israelites might not have been able to tell you the etymology of a word any more than you can tell somebody in Japan, what the etymology of an English word is. So number is another characteristic of Hebrew nouns. There's singulars, there's plurals, and there's also a dual, meaning two things. State. Now here's where this video is going to introduce you to something that it would be helpful to know with regard to Hebrew, something that you can't get from an English translation, or at least is something about Hebrew that isn't true of English or any other language I personally know. Now, the absolute state is kind of what we're used to. So davar can mean word, and that's fine. Wonderful. Word, a word. Let me have a word with you. Now here's where Hebrew is unique, is it has what's called a construct state. And when a word is in the construct state, you put the word of after it. Now this is different from Greek. In Greek, if something is in the genitive case, you put the word of in front of it. But in Hebrew, if something is in the construct state, you put the word of after it. So the word of the Lord is Devar Adonai, for example. It would be one way to say that. And there's no way to tell from the consonants whether a word is absolute or construct most of the time. You'll notice that the dalet, beit, resh is the same in both cases. What happens is the way if you were to learn Hebrew completely, what you would learn is that when a noun is in the construct state, all of the longness of the vowels is sucked out of it. It's like like you suck all the energy out of the vowel. So so it goes from in the absolute state having kametz to long A's, strong A's, to having a shavah here, which is a downgraded kametz, and a patak, which is a downgraded kametz. The shavah is a really downgraded kametz. And what's going on here is in the construct, the noun is closely associated with the word that comes after it. So like the word of the Lord, it's like the Lord is the center of that expression. And so Lord becomes where all of your breath is going to go. And so it's like all of the breath is sucked out of word. And so all the vowels, you lose your breath, all the vowels are downgraded. Again, you don't need to know that. If you have a good cheat, either a cheat book or a cheat software, it's going to tell you that a noun is in the construct state, and so you won't have to figure out all that stuff about the vowels. The key thing about the meaning is that if a noun is in the construct state, you put the word of after it. Now, a third category for state, at least we can throw it here, is the definite state. And this would be when we put the word the in front of the word. So hadavar would be the word. And the way that Hebrew does this, of course, if you're using an interlinear, you're going to see the word the there. But so you know what's going on. The way that you make a noun in the definite state, the way you put the word the on it, is you put a hey and then a patak, and then you double the first consonant of the word. And so hadavar means the word. And that, you might say, is in the definite state because it has the word the on it. So the construct state, I've just mentioned that. That's when you put the word of after it. Again, like I said, it's the opposite of Greek. So if a Hebrew word is in the construct state, it means word of. Whereas in Greek, if something's in the genitive case, it means of word. So it's the opposite of Greek. Now the definite, you have these constructs can be piled up. So you can say the word of the man of the Lord, or the brightness of the sun of the solar system. You can have these what are called construct chains, where all the air is sucked out of the vowels of all these words leading up to the final ta-da, the final end of the chain. Whether a construct chain is definite, that is, whether it's the word of the man of the Lord, or whether it's indefinite, a man of the Lord, and so forth, that depends on the final word. If the final word is definite in a construct chain, then all of the words leading up to it are definite. If the final word is not definite, then all the words leading up to it. So is it a word of the Lord, a word of a Lord, or the word of the Lord? It all depends on whether the final word in the construct chain is definite as to whether all the words before it are definite or not. You can't interrupt a construct chain. So you can't stick a his in the middle of a construct chain, or you can't stick a adjective in the middle of a construct chain. So the construct chain, it's all a package deal. All of the words that are this, of this, of this, they all have to be uninterrupted, without any pronouns or adjectives or prepositions. There can't be anything in the middle of a construct chain. Here's some more construct weirdness. Har kadashim, or I'm sorry, har kadshin. I think that's a kametz katuf. Mountain of his holiness. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. So what does that mean, the mountain of his holiness? Could it mean my mountain of holiness? You see, you can't stick the my on mountain. There's no way. Hebrew doesn't do my mountain of holiness, because you can't interrupt a construct chain. So if you want to say my mountain of holiness, you have to say the mountain of my holiness. Now, again, there's some ambiguity here in Hebrew. Is it really my mountain of holiness, or did God really want to say mountain of my holiness. It's one of those things where interpretation is a little bit ambiguous. But that's what we mean when we say that you can't interrupt a construct chain. You can't put a my on the har, which means mountain. By the way, this is how you make how you say my holiness. You put a sufformative, a hirik yod in this case, on the end of the word for holiness, kodesh. So that's another kind of a fun thing that Hebrew does. And let's talk about that. Pronomial suffixes. Now there are freestanding pronouns. A pronoun is a word that stands in place of a noun, like I, you, they. Those are called independent pronouns. They're called independent pronouns in Hebrew because they stand alone as their own word. Remember in the previous slide I said that some pronouns are suffixes, that is, they're stuck right on a noun, my holiness. But there are actually some pronouns that stand as separate words. So here are two key ones. This is the word who, which means he, which is a little confusing. Who is he? And then this is even more confusing. The pronoun he means she. So my professor of Hebrew in seminary always used to say that Hebrew is the only language where who is he is she, and dog means fish. And dog is fish. Anyway, this is the word that means he, who, and this is the word that means she, he. So there are some pronouns that stand by themselves. You don't need to learn them because if you're using an interlinear, the interlinear will tell you what the word means. However, there are pronouns that are stuck on the end of a noun. So kadshi, the word this is a hirik yod that means my. So my holiness. They can be possessive, but they can also be objects of verbs. So you can say I see him, and you can put the him right on the end of I see. Again, you don't have to memorize these, although if you want to memorize that hirik yod means my, another good one to know is the holam vav. Holam vav on the end of a noun means his. So if this was kadsho, it would mean his holiness. So you might want to memorize some of them, but really I'm preparing you for looking at an interlinear and knowing what you're looking at. So if you see kadshi in an interlinear, and you see above in the interlinear or below, wherever the interlinear translates it, and it says my holiness, or holiness my, or whatever, you'll know, well, what in the world? How did those two words come out of this one word? And then you'd remember this video. Oh, there are these things called pronomial suffixes, where the his or the my or the him at the end of a verb is tacked on to the word. And so that's the benefit of this, not to have you memorize it, but to know that it happens. The article we've mentioned, I've already mentioned it, and that is normally the article is a hey with a patak and then a doubled next letter. So ha davar is the word. And so you know that most words at their base are three letters. So there's the three, and then this has a the on the front. Ha davar, the word. Now there is some craziness that can happen. So there are four letters that are called gutturals. Aleph, ayin, hey, and chet. None of those letters do doubling. And so we have a hey. This was supposed to be a patak, and this was supposed to double. But the ayin said, I'm sorry, it's not in my contract, I don't do doubling. The hey tried to shoot a dagesh into the ayin, and it bounced off and made this a kamet. So that's sometimes called compensatory lengthening, where because this guttural doesn't do doubling, the patak becomes a long a to make up for it, or I'll show you, I'll become a long a. Now, the article can also be squashed. Let's say you've got a little smart car in between two trucks, and what can happen is the hay can be squashed. So this is in the word. If you remember from a previous video, bait means in, and there's davar that means word. Where'd the hay patak doubling go? Well, I see the patak and I see the doubling, but the hay has been run over. It's been squashed in the crash. And so This is in the word. In comes from the bait. Patak doubling gives me the, and then davar means word. So those are some of the crazy things that Hebrew does with the article. And this is, I mean, I think it's fun. Go open a page of the Hebrew Bible, or go to Blue Letter Bible and get the Hebrew of some verse from the Old Testament. And you can see this on every page where there are lots of does here and there, and you can figure this stuff out. You can see it in your favorite verses in the Old Testament. Now, this seemed like as good a place as any to introduce the kind of question introducer. Sometimes when a Hebrew sentence wants to make a question, it will put a hey with a katef patak on the front. I don't think it always does this, but if you see a hey at the front of a sentence, and in your interlinear it tells you it's a question, well, that's probably what it is. It's a question. What the hey? It's a question introducer, and there you have it. Now here's another one. Hebrew can tell you that it has a direct object coming, and so both it can be in either of the form ate. If it's standing by itself, it's probably going to be ate. If it has a makef, that is a dash after it, that connects it to the following word, then it might be et, because when you connect things to the following word, they tend to lose their spiz as far as vowel length. We find this form in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning was the heavens and the earth. And so, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens and the earth is direct object. God created what? He created heavens, He created earth. And so you have this definite object marker in front of heavens, and you have this definite object marker in front of earth. It's Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning created God, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And so you've got that et twice to tell you that a definite direct object is direct object is coming. Again, this is the miscellaneous chapter, or miscellaneous video. I want to mention two other words that are significant that you find from time to time. I don't know that they're on every page of the Old Testament. They're not. But yesh means there is, and ayin means there is not. Again, two words to be aware of because they will appear from time to time. So I want to end this video by talking about adjectives. How do Hebrew adjectives work? Well, as in many languages, adjectives agree with the noun they go with in gender, in number, and in definiteness. So if you have a feminine noun, the adjective is going to be feminine. If you have a singular noun, the adjective is going to be singular. And if it's a straightforward the good man, if the noun has a the on it, then the adjective will have a the on it. Now this is not true when the definiteness thing won't work when you're saying the man is good. That's what predicative means. If you say the man is good, not only won't there be an is there, but you won't have the on the good, as I'll show you in a second. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you just go with the good man, or here we have ha melech ha tov. This is the king, hey patak doubling, the king, ha tov, hey patak doubling, tov means good. So that's the good king, the good. The adjective will tend to come after the noun in Hebrew. And so this is the good king is the way you translate that. Even though it's literally the king, the good, the way you're going to translate it into English is the good king. Your interlinear will have the good king there probably. Again, tov, the adjective, agrees with melech in gender, it's masculine. It agrees in number, it's singular, and it agrees in definiteness. It has a the on it. Now, predicative is when you're going to add the word is or are. It's kind of caveman talk. The king, good. The king is good. Now here, because tov is not the good king, but it's the king good, the king is good, tov doesn't have the on it. So when an adjective is being used in this predicative way, it won't agree in having the article. Now, if you have a construct chain, the adjective will come after the construct chain because, again, you can't interrupt a construct chain. So bat means daughter, and it's in construct. The length has been sucked out of it. So it's the daughter of ha, na, vi, im, the prophets, the daughter of the prophets, and then ha, tovim, the daughter of the good prophets. There you have that. Good comes at the end of the chain. Finally, how do you make an adjective into an ER or an EST? Greater or greatest? Well, to make it ER, to make it comparative, greater than these, that kind of thing, you're often going to use the word for from. So the Hebrew word min, which means from, can be used to make something greater. Great from them. Greater than them would be. And again, you don't expect it to be a straightforward translation into English. It's more, think of it more poetically. You have to get a feel for it. You've got to dance with it. So great from means greater. How do you make it EST? Well, you can do it in more than one way. So you can say King of Kings, which means the greatest king, the royalist, which is not a word, but the greatest king. You can say great from all. Again, that means greatest. And of course, there's holy, holy, holy. The holiest of all is God. So there you have nouns and adjectives and a little bit extra thrown in the language of Hebrew.